At the height of her fame, Ellen DeGeneres occupied a rare space in American entertainment. She was both a daily presence and a symbolic figure. For nearly 2 decades, she appeared in millions of homes as a talk show host whose brand centered on humor, kindness, and surprise generosity. Viewers associated her with lightness in a media environment that often felt heavy. She danced onto stage each afternoon, gave away cars, reunited families, and turned celebrity interviews into relaxed conversations rather than formal exchanges. Her image was so consistent that it began to feel stable, almost institutional, as if it would always exist. Yet beneath that polished surface, her career had already lived multiple lives: stand-up comedian, sitcom pioneer, cultural lightning rod, and reinvention expert. What made her rise remarkable was not just success, but resilience through reinvention. She had already survived professional exile in the late 1990s after publicly coming out as gay at a time when mainstream acceptance was far less common. She rebuilt herself again in the early 2000s with a daytime talk show that seemed harmless on the surface, but became a global phenomenon. For years, she was considered one of the most trusted personalities in entertainment. That trust, however, became central to the later scrutiny she faced. By the late 2060s and early 2020s, public perception shifted dramatically. Viral clips, workplace allegations, and cultural reassessments began to challenge the carefully maintained image she had built. The same visibility that once protected her now amplified criticism. The story of Ellen DeGeneres, therefore, is not only about fame, but about how modern media reinterprets fame itself when audience expectations change faster than celebrity branding can adapt. Childhood shaped by silence, discipline, and emotional restraint, Ellen DeGeneres was born into a household defined by strict religious beliefs and emotional restraint. Raised in a Christian Science environment, her early life was governed by rules that discouraged conventional medical treatment and emphasized prayer as the primary response to illness or distress. This environment shaped how she understood vulnerability. Emotions were not openly discussed, and discomfort was often managed internally rather than expressed outwardly. For a child, this created a framework where silence became a survival skill. Her parents' separation during her adolescence added instability to an already tightly controlled emotional world. When her mother later remarried, Ellen's family life shifted again, introducing new dynamics and responsibilities. Around this period, her mother faced a serious health challenge, and Ellen found herself in a caregiving role at a young age. These experiences required emotional maturity beyond her years and reinforced the habit of containing feelings rather than externalizing them. Reports about her early life also include allegations of abuse within her household, which she later described publicly in interviews and memoir reflections. These experiences, particularly when not acknowledged or believed at the time, contributed to a sense of isolation. Like many who grow up in environments where emotional expression is limited or dismissed, she learned to navigate life through observation, humor, and adaptation, rather than open confrontation. Before entering entertainment, she cycled through ordinary jobs, retail, waiting tables, office work, experiences that grounded her in everyday labor and communication. These roles, combined with early personal hardship, later informed her comedic style, which relied on relatability and observational humor. Her early life did not point clearly toward fame, but it shaped the emotional instincts that would later define her public persona. Discovering comedy through loss, survival, and self-invention, Ellen DeGeneres' entry into comedy was not a planned career move but a gradual emergence shaped by grief, financial instability, and personal reflection. After experiencing the sudden death of a close partner in the early 1980s, she faced emotional shock alongside practical hardship. She struggled with housing instability and lived in difficult conditions during a period of uncertainty. In this environment, humor became less a performance choice and more a coping mechanism. One of the earliest seeds of her comedic voice came from imagining surreal conversations with God, about loss and meaning. These internal monologues eventually developed into stand-up material. Comedy clubs in New Orleans became her first testing ground, where she introduced herself not as a trained performer, but as someone relying on instinct and lived experience. Her early routines stood out because they avoided aggressive punchlines and instead leaned toward observational storytelling and personal reflection. In 1982, she gained national recognition after winning a televised comedy competition, which opened doors to touring opportunities and club performances across the United States. She refined her style in competitive environments like San Francisco's comedy circuit, where she performed multiple sets nightly. Unlike many comedians of the era who relied on shock value or confrontational humor, she built a reputation for being approachable and clean, which later became central to her mainstream appeal. Her breakthrough appearance on a major late-night talk show further accelerated her visibility, introducing her to a national audience. That moment validated her comedic approach and signaled that her style could succeed on television. What began as a survival response to grief evolved into a professional identity that would eventually reshape daytime television itself. The late-night breakthrough that changed her trajectory. A defining moment in Ellen DeGeneres' early career came with her appearance on a major late-night talk show in the mid-1980s. Her set, built around a conversational and introspective comedic style, resonated strongly with the audience and host. What made the moment especially significant was not just the performance itself, but the endorsement that followed. Being invited to sit on the host's couch was a symbolic gesture in television comedy, signaling acceptance into the upper tier of stand-up performers. This appearance transformed her visibility almost overnight. Comedy clubs and television producers began to see her as a performer with mainstream potential rather than a niche act. Her material, which relied on everyday observations rather than provocative humor, positioned her as a safe and adaptable presence for television audiences. In an era when stand-up comedy often leaned toward edginess and controversy, her tone stood apart as calm, reflective, and accessible. Following this breakthrough, she began securing television roles and developing sitcom concepts. Although early projects were inconsistent in success, they demonstrated industry confidence in her ability to transition from stand-up to scripted television. These years were marked by experimentation rather than stability, but they laid the groundwork for her eventual lead role in a network sitcom. Her early career trajectory illustrates a pattern that would repeat throughout her life. Moments of breakthrough followed by reinvention. Each stage of success expanded her platform, but also increased expectations. The late-night appearance did not simply elevate her career, it positioned her as a television personality in the making, setting the stage for her eventual transition into sitcom fame. Sitcom success and the emergence of a public identity. By the mid-1990s, Ellen DeGeneres had transitioned into a leading role in a network sitcom that bore her name. The show initially began as an ensemble comedy but gradually centered on her character, reflecting both her growing star power and the network's confidence in her appeal. The series presented her as relatable, awkward, and self-aware, qualities that aligned closely with her stand-up persona. The sitcom's success was moderate at first, but it gained cultural significance over time due to its tonal consistency and accessibility. It portrayed everyday life with humor that avoided controversy, making it suitable for a broad audience. During this period, Ellen DeGeneres became one of the most recognizable television faces in America, known for a style that emphasized relatability over spectacle. However, behind the scenes, she was navigating personal questions about identity and public perception. At the time, Hollywood still carried significant stigma around openly gay actors leading mainstream television shows. This tension created a separation between her public image and private life. While her character on television remained ambiguous in early seasons, discussions about representation and identity were already emerging within the industry. The sitcom era established her as a household name and solidified her reputation as a, quote, safe comedic presence. It also created the foundation for one of the most significant turning points in her career, the decision to publicly come out, both in real life and through her television character. This shift would transform her from a mainstream sitcom star into a cultural flashpoint. Coming out, cultural shockwaves, and television history. In the late 1990s, Ellen DeGeneres made a decision that would permanently alter her career trajectory and place her at the center of cultural conversation. She publicly came out as gay at a time when mainstream television had very few openly LGBTQ+ leading figures. The announcement was carefully coordinated, including a widely publicized magazine cover that became iconic for its directness and simplicity. Shortly afterward, her sitcom reflected this reality through a landmark episode in which her character also came out. The episode became one of the most watched television events of its time, drawing tens of millions of viewers and generating intense national discussion. For many, it represented progress in visibility and representation. For others, it was controversial and even unacceptable, prompting backlash from certain groups and advertisers. The response was polarized. Advocacy organizations celebrated the moment as groundbreaking, while conservative audiences and institutions reacted negatively. Some advertisers withdrew support, and the show faced increased scrutiny. Threats and protests were reported around the production, contributing to a tense atmosphere surrounding the series. Over time, ratings declined and the sitcom eventually ended. The cancellation marked a turning point in her career, leading to a period of professional uncertainty. Offers slowed, and the industry's willingness to support openly gay leading performers remained limited at the time. Despite the setbacks, the moment remains historically significant in television history. It expanded the boundaries of representation and permanently linked Ellen DeGeneres' name with a major cultural shift. However, it also demonstrated the professional risks associated with visibility during that era, setting the stage for her later reinvention. Industry rejection, failed reinventions, and professional uncertainty. Following the end of her sitcom, Ellen DeGeneres entered a difficult period in her career. Although she remained well-known, the television industry was hesitant to invest in her as a leading figure. A subsequent sitcom attempt in the early 2000s failed to gain traction and was canceled quickly due to low ratings and limited critical response. This reinforced the perception that her mainstream appeal had diminished. During this time, Hollywood offered fewer opportunities, particularly in leading roles. The entertainment landscape had not yet fully embraced LGBTQ+ representation in mainstream programming, and executives often viewed her past controversy as a risk factor. As a result, she faced a period of professional instability despite her previous success. This phase is often described as one of reinvention pressure rather than disappearance. She continued to work, perform, and explore new formats, but without the platform she once had. The contrast between her earlier fame and current uncertainty was stark, especially for someone who had previously been a cultural trailblazer. Rather than persisting in primetime sitcom formats, she began exploring daytime television, a genre that offered more flexibility and less reliance on traditional network ratings expectations. This decision would ultimately prove pivotal, but at the time, it was seen as a significant step down in visibility. The transition reflected both necessity and strategy. With limited options in scripted television, she shifted toward formats that allowed for personality-driven content. This move laid the foundation for what would become one of the most successful daytime talk shows in television history. Reinvention through daytime television and a new public persona. The launch of her daytime talk show in the early 2000s marked a turning point in Ellen DeGeneres' career. Entering a competitive field dominated by established personalities, she positioned her show as light, accessible, and emotionally positive. From its earliest episodes, the program emphasized humor, dancing, audience interaction, and surprise giveaways, creating a distinct identity within the genre. Her opening routine, dancing onto the stage, became an immediate signature. It set a tone that differentiated her from more traditional interview-based talk shows. Guests were encouraged to relax, and conversations often leaned toward humor and personal storytelling rather than hard journalism or controversy. The show quickly gained popularity, fueled in part by its adaptability to emerging internet platforms. Short clips of emotional surprises, celebrity interactions, and audience giveaways spread widely online, helping the show reach global audiences beyond traditional television viewership. This digital amplification contributed significantly to its growth. A key element of the show's success was its emphasis on generosity. Large-scale giveaways, seasonal events, and emotional reunions became recurring features. These segments reinforced an image of kindness and positivity that became closely associated with Ellen DeGeneres herself, blurring the line between host and brand. By the mid-2000s, the show had become a dominant force in daytime television, earning awards and attracting millions of daily viewers. This period marked the peak of her reinvention, transforming her from a previously controversial figure into one of the most trusted personalities in entertainment. Peak fame, global influence, and expansion beyond television. At the height of her success, Ellen DeGeneres had become more than a talk show host. She was a cultural brand. Her influence extended beyond television into film, live events, endorsements, and business ventures. She voiced a beloved animated character in a major global film franchise, which introduced her to audiences who may not have watched her talk show. The success of that film further cemented her mainstream popularity. Her public image during this period was defined by positivity and generosity. The phrase associated with her brand emphasized kindness and became a cultural slogan. Viewers associated her with emotional moments, surprise gifts, and uplifting storytelling. This consistent branding helped her maintain high ratings and strong advertiser support. She also expanded into hosting major award shows and participating in high-profile entertainment events. One particularly viral moment at a major award ceremony involved a group selfie with multiple celebrities, which became one of the most shared images in early social media history. This moment highlighted her ability to merge traditional celebrity culture with emerging digital platforms. Outside of television, she developed business ventures in fashion, lifestyle branding, and real estate. These enterprises contributed significantly to her financial success and reinforced her status as a multimedia entrepreneur. By the mid-2010s, she was widely regarded as one of the most powerful figures in entertainment, with influence spanning multiple industries. At this stage, her public identity seemed stable and universally positive. However, this period of peak admiration also created the conditions for later scrutiny, as the gap between public perception and private workplace experiences would eventually become a focal point of criticism. Early cracks in the image and the rise of viral reinterpretation. By the late 2010s, subtle shifts began to emerge in how audiences perceived Ellen DeGeneres. The rise of social media platforms changed how older television moments were interpreted. Clips from interviews, once viewed as harmless humor, were revisited under new cultural standards that emphasized consent, boundaries, and power dynamics. Several moments resurfaced online and gained renewed attention. Interactions with celebrities that were once considered playful were now analyzed more critically. Some viewers interpreted these exchanges as uncomfortable or uneven in power, particularly when guests appeared hesitant or pressured during comedic segments. This reassessment was not immediate but gradual. As audiences began re-evaluating media from previous decades, expectations for on-screen behavior evolved. What had once been accepted as entertainment began to be scrutinized through a more critical lens. These discussions were amplified by viral platforms, where short clips could circulate independently of context. A single moment could be isolated, reinterpreted, and widely shared within hours. This shift made public image more vulnerable than ever before, especially for long-running television personalities. At the same time, behind-the-scenes reports from former employees began to circulate informally, suggesting dissatisfaction with workplace culture. While these accounts had not yet reached mainstream attention, they contributed to a growing undercurrent of skepticism about the gap between public persona and private reality. These early cracks did not immediately threaten her career, but they marked the beginning of a significant transformation in public perception that would accelerate dramatically in the following years. Workplace allegations, reporting, and institutional fallout. In 2020, a major investigative report brought widespread attention to allegations about the workplace environment behind the Ellen DeGeneres show. The report included accounts from multiple former employees who described experiences of fear, intimidation, and strict workplace hierarchies. These accounts suggested a significant disconnect between the show's public message of kindness and its internal culture. Allegations included claims of retaliation, mistreatment, and inconsistent enforcement of workplace standards. Some employees reported that raising concerns could lead to professional consequences. Others described an environment where senior producers held significant unchecked influence. These accounts painted a complex picture of production dynamics rather than a single unified narrative. Following the report, several senior staff members were removed or resigned, and the show's production company issued internal reviews. Ellen DeGeneres herself addressed employees and publicly apologized, stating that she was aware of issues and committed to improving workplace culture. However, public response to her statements was mixed, with some viewing them as insufficient or overly defensive. The controversy quickly spread across social media, where past clips and personal accounts were widely shared and debated. The show's reputation, once built on emotional positivity, faced significant criticism. Advertisers and viewers began to reassess their relationship with the program. Ratings declined sharply in the months that followed, reflecting both audience disengagement and reputational damage. Over time, the show concluded after nearly 2 decades on air, marking the end of one of the most successful daytime talk shows in television history. Final years, relocation, and legacy in a changing media landscape. After the conclusion of her talk show, Ellen DeGeneres gradually stepped away from daily television production. She explored limited media projects and comedy specials, reflecting on her career and public perception with a more self-aware tone. These later appearances acknowledged both her achievements and the controversies surrounding her workplace legacy. In 2024, she released a stand-up special that addressed themes of fame, public judgment, and personal reflection. Rather than attempting to fully reshape her image, the material leaned into commentary about how public narratives evolve and how media scrutiny intensifies over time. Around the same period, she and her spouse relocated outside the United States, a move widely interpreted as a desire for privacy and distance from ongoing media attention. This shift marked a quieter phase of life compared to her previous decades of constant public visibility. Her legacy remains complex and layered. On one hand, she is recognized for breaking barriers in LGBTQ+ representation on television and for reshaping daytime talk show formats into emotionally driven entertainment. On the other hand, her later career became associated with debates about workplace culture, celebrity branding, and the gap between public image and private reality. Ultimately, Ellen DeGeneres' story reflects broader changes in media itself. Fame is now more transparent, more constantly evaluated, and more vulnerable to reinterpretation than ever before. Her rise and fall are not just about one individual, but about how audiences, technology, and cultural expectations reshape the meaning of celebrity over time.